He was my best mate in the team. He's the guy that everyone looked up to. Life of the party, like you would think nothing is wrong with this guy. I was like, how didn't I know? And so from that point, I was like, I'm never letting that happen again. 17-year-old kid. I had no idea how to navigate that. I didn't go to the funeral. I was like, I didn't talk to his mum until a couple months ago.
Did you hesitate before sending that message?
Nah,
it was just like
straight in.
And how long since you'd spoken to her?
8 years.
Welcome back to another episode of Good Grief. Today I'm joined on the couch, not by my wife. If you're watching on YouTube, you can probably tell that, but by my good bud Keegan Hipgrave. How are you, buddy?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
Awesome. It's so good to have you here. I'm looking forward to the conversation today. For all of you listening that don't know Keegan, we're about to unpack some pretty powerful stuff today. And I've only heard a little bit of what you've shared. But I want to let everybody know that's listening or watching or wherever you're tuning in from, today we are going to be covering suicide and talking about that. And even as I say it, I feel a tension rise up like in my chest and my voice. So if that is of concern to you, maybe don't listen. But if you've been impacted by suicide, I think this episode's going to be incredibly powerful. So not to jump straight in there, but I want to say welcome. I just had to say that for everybody.
Mate, you said that very well. I'm very excited to be here, brother. So thanks for having me.
It's super cool. Dude, can I do the honor of trying to introduce
I would love you
my
to,
friend.
Mate. I would love to.
Now, I'm an NRL fan. Like, I used to come home from youth groups on Friday nights and I'd love flicking on the TV and watching a bit of whatever game was on. Wasn't too attached to like any one particular team until you started playing. And I think we met through Jesse. Like, you lived across the road. Is that right? Is that how we met? Like, did you live there for a bit?
My good friend and your good friend Jesse Blackley, he's one of my best friends growing up. I think we just used to knock around the same
areas.
Circles and same areas, and obviously saw you a lot growing up, which was really cool.
So for people listening, we've got a big audience in like States, UK, might not know what NRL is. I'm going to just put it out there and say it's like the NFL of Australia.
It's like the NFL of Australia. Yeah, it's kind of a combination for those who are in Europe, a bit more like rugby, for those who know rugby. But yeah, it's kind of like a little bit like the NFL in Australia. And
you played first grade. You were raised up by the Broncos, Brisbane Broncos, moved to Gold Coast Titans and debuted at 20. Is that?
Yeah. Just turned 20.
Debuted at 20.
Yeah.
And you spent how many years with the Titans?
I spent, I think, 4.5 years at the Gold Coast Titans, probably where I played most of my best footy, I think. And then,
moved down to Parramatta, down to close to my hometown.
Yeah.
I lived in North Ryde. I was born
Did you live in North Ryde?
Yeah. Well,
when I first went to Sydney, I lived in Ryde.
There you go.
Because I was like, I want to be halfway between training out at Parramatta and halfway to the beach, whether that being Maroubra or Bondi or Coogee. So,
there you go.
Yeah.
And like, we're not here to talk about footy today, although it might be part of the story. You've got your own podcast called Keegan and Company, and you're interviewing and talking to a lot of the guys that you play with, and you're usually in the seat that I'm in. Yes. So I just, before we start, I just love to know, like, what about today is going to be different, interesting, like, for you?
It's a little bit weird being on the other end of the microphone, and it is something that I am really excited for. You know, we've had a few conversations over the last couple of weeks in prep for this conversation. And I think the thing that I'm most excited about, especially leading into it, was like the reflection piece. Like, knowing that I'm coming on today, it forced me to do a lot of reflection.
Wow.
Which was really cool. And then I know, like, Keegan and Company, the podcast that I host, it's predominantly around mental health and sport and encouraging conversations. So if I wasn't open to come on a platform like this and talk about my own struggles and vulnerabilities, then I think I'd be a bit of a hypocrite. Mate, I encourage these conversations. I think it's super important to have these conversations. And brother, I'm very excited to sit down with you today.
Yeah. So let's back it up. So, like, you'll do a better job at this than me, but I want you to set the scene of like where you are today is very different than where you were 2 and a bit years ago,
Yeah.
right? And so just give everybody a bit of an idea as to your like background, upbringing,
Yep.
and then where that led into footy and sort of how we got to where we are today.
Gotcha. Well, there's a few sliding door moments in that story. I guess probably where I started was on the Gold Coast. I grew up on the Gold Coast, predominantly in Palm Beach, which is a beautiful area, as you would know. But yeah, my upbringing was very sport focused. You know, I did a lot of surfing, rugby league, obviously, surf lifesaving, water polo. My parents are very sporty people. Like my mum was a PE teacher, so she had us in the pool. Like I think when we got home from the hospital after giving birth, like she was mad. Like
that's
mad.
the dream.
I know. We were very, very fortunate to have a really good upbringing in terms of sport. Got to access most sports. Anything that we wanted to play, we were allowed to play. I signed, I guess, like a junior development contract when I was, I think, 13 with the Brisbane Broncos. And for anyone who's listening, that's kind of just like a couple trainings a month. You get some boots and some kit, and you get to go and train. And it's kind of like a development program for up and coming Broncos. So yeah, played all the junior reps. Got to play Queensland schoolboys. Got to play Australian schoolboys, which we'll probably touch on later down the track in this conversation. But yeah, I guess I didn't think rugby league was going to be a career probably until I was 17.
Interesting.
Yeah. My mum was a big, I guess like, she was so positive around education and university and studies. And so she's always like, you've got to have a plan B if footy doesn't work out. Obviously, every kid wants to play professional footy. But when I was 17, I signed my first professional contract with the Brisbane Broncos at 17 years old. It was a 4-year deal, which at that age is pretty rare. I didn't know anyone in my circles that had signed a deal like that before. It means that overnight I knew what I was going to be doing for the next 4 years.
They've got you on a trajectory and you're going to follow that.
And from as soon as I signed that contract, my, I guess, identity and I guess the person I thought I was an NRL player. And anything less than a footy player, I'm like, I would really struggle with. I went super hard. I wanted to make my NRL debut before I was 18. Before I was 20. I had this little goal in my mind, and I think partly that was because a guy who I really looked up to growing up, a guy by the name of Corey Parker, who captained the Brisbane Broncos. It was two things. He made his debut at 18 and he bought his first house at 18. And I was like, well, if I could be half the player that Corey Parker was, then I want to make my debut before I was 20, and I want to buy my first house before I was 20. And that was like the two goals that I had in my mind. I don't know where I think like obviously that's where I got it from, but stupid and unrealistic. Anyway, I put a lot of pressure on myself to like go down the NRL track, had a bunch of injuries, end up moving away from the Brisbane Broncos purely because their side was so stacked. Like their whole forward pack, which is the position that I was playing in, was like a state of origin side.
That means stacked, meaning there's not much room. You're fighting for a spot.
I knew that I was probably a good like 2 or 3 years away before I was going to get a start or relying on injury.
Sure.
In that time, there was an opportunity to go back to the Gold Coast Titans, which was my hometown. I had a lot of friends playing in that side. And so I thought this is a great opportunity to make my NRL debut.
Yeah.
I moved to the Gold Coast Titans in late 2017, where I got to make my NRL debut, which was a dream come true. I was 20 at the time.
That's when I started flicking the TV back on.
Yeah. So it was cool. Like that year was amazing. Like I got to make my NRL debut. I got to buy my first house at 20.
So epic.
Just before I was just clicked over the 20-year mark, but it was still a dream. And then moved on to the Parramatta Eels later in my career. And I guess that's sort of a little picture of what it looked like.
Yeah. And in that journey, I mean, you're 27 now. You're not playing footy anymore.
Yeah.
Like on the mental health side of things, do you want to just tell a bit about the story as to like?
Of course. Yeah. I think anyone who's super passionate about a topic or a theme usually has a personal relationship with it. So now I'm more than happy to have this conversation. When I back to the Australian schoolboys, back to when I was 17 years old. that was like playing Australian schoolboys was my first big goal.
Right.
Like that was the first time where I was like, I had written up on my mirror. I did
awesome.
did all like the big goals, medium goals, short term goals. I had it so dialed in where I was like, this is what I have to be doing. This is what teams I have to do in the lead up to that. It was a whole couple year process, and so that was the goal. And we did it. Like I got to do it, and in the competition before the selection. We were playing like the Australian schoolboys competition, so all the states play against each other. And me and a guy by the name of Keegan Hipgrave, who we both got to captain the Queensland schoolboys side. He was my best mate in the team. Like he was the guy. He was the main captain. He's the guy that everyone looked up to. Like we roomed together. Like best mate. Like he was such a funny guy. Like I looked
Life of the party.
Life of the party. Like you would think nothing is wrong with this guy. Like got all the girls, like best smiling all the time. Like super fun.
Yeah. The guy to pick you up when you're down. Yeah.
Mate, always. And and we used to have so much fun. Like we used to just have, like every representative side that we would go away, we would just have so much fun, and we'd always just like cling to each other. And another guy by the name of Kurt DeLewis, me and Regan were rooming together, and Kurt wasn't in our room, but Kurt was always just in the room, just like somehow he just weaseled his way in. And this is like nights before like our big games the next day, and we're like, I just have these vivid memories of us just like in the room, just like hysterically laughing, like before night of a game, like late at night.
So good.
For those who know me, like I go to bed very early, like, and so this was a big thing. Anyway. We both got picked in the Australian schoolboys. Regan and I both got picked. But what happened, and when you get picked in the Australian schoolboys, you got a 6-week tour over in England and France.
Right.
So it's an incredible tour. You know, you got test matches against the national French team, the national English team. It's a cool trip.
Yeah.
Anyway, Regan ended up breaking his ankle in one of the last games of the competition. Still got selected in the schoolboys side.
No way.
But couldn't go overseas. Like couldn't do the trip.
Wow.
Which was devastating.
Yeah.
Like devastating for him. Like he wanted to, and that was always the thing that we talked about was doing.
He couldn't because of the ankle.
His ankle was broken.
It wasn't because the team said you can't come. Like,
nah. Well, like there's no point of him going away if he couldn't play. Yeah. So he didn't come, and it was the best trip.
Yeah.
Like it was such a cool trip, and like we're posting all these photos and yeah, anyway, that was probably late November, December. And then earlier, it was Australia Day that following year. 2015, Regan ended up committing suicide.
Wow.
That following year. And it's wild because it's still tough to talk about now. Like, and I've spoken about this like a few times now.
So that's only 2 months after.
2 months after. What we later found out, or what I only found out a couple months ago, was that Regan was struggling with bipolar, which we didn't know.
Sure. Had you ever seen a different side?
No, like never. I only saw like the super happy side of Regan. I only saw the fun, energetic, positive, lifting everyone up. Like I didn't see any from the outside looking in, you would think this guy has it all figured out. And so when I saw that, I was like, well, how can a guy that's super fun, super positive, respected by everyone.
Yeah.
And like we didn't know. Like I was rooming with him. I was like, how didn't I know? And so from that point, I was like, I'm never letting that happen again. Yeah, and so that started the whole mental health journey, where I wanted to encourage mates to talk about what they were going through, especially in a footy environment, man. Like footy environment's such a supposed to be brave macho thing, especially coming into grade. Like that's what it was like back in the day. And I was like, well, I don't want to lose any more mates to this. Like
no one talking about stuff. No one pulling back and just saying, hey, this is where I'm at. Like
yeah. So that was we lost Regan, and from there I jumped on board with Movember. Been a Movember ambassador for the last 8 years, which I love. They do amazing things in the mental health space, also testicular cancer and prostate cancer. But I really lent in the mental health space. We would do big fundraisers at the Gold Coast Titans. We would do it every year. Every November we'd grow a moustache. My moustache is all year round. But we would shave it off at the end of the year. We raised a bunch of money, and it was great. Just a great way to have these conversations.
How was that? So did you jump in straight after Regan's death?
Mate. I suppressed it.
Yeah.
Fully suppressed it. 17-year-old kid. I had no idea how to navigate that. I didn't go to the funeral. I was like, I didn't talk to his mum until a couple months ago. You know, like I was a 17-year-old kid who didn't know how to deal with that. And so what I did was I put it in a box, but I think there was always something subconsciously that was like, I don't want to let that happen again.
Sure.
So I didn't think about it for ages. And it wasn't until I started going down more recently in the last maybe 6 to 12 months where I was like, I want to do a deep dive into mental health. So back to uni, studying psychology.
Yeah.
You know, I started a mental health and sport podcast. I'm currently working for the NRL Players Association.
Oh, epic.
Where I get to help players transition out of rugby league and into retirement.
It's massive.
It's huge.
What do I do?
What do I do?
You know?
And the whole, I guess, I didn't, so I suppressed it. And then when I started...
So when you say suppressed it,
Yeah.
what did that look like in your life? Because like you don't just deal with your best mate not being here easily. Like what did suppression look like?
Well, at first, I remember the phone call. It was Kurt DeLewis who rang me, who was always in the room with us. He rang me on Australia Day morning, and he told me, he's like, Keeks, like Rick's committed suicide.
You guys were back here in the country by that time?
Australia. Yeah, we're back in Australia. It was the following year.
Okay.
And obviously cried so obviously so sad.
Yeah.
Was super upset for a little while there, but then I don't know. It was from memory. I think I didn't move, but I think I just got on with it. That's what I mean. I think I just put it in a box and put it away, and I didn't talk about it. I didn't talk about it to anyone. I spoke to mum recently, and she's like, we didn't want to bring it up with you because we didn't want to make you upset.
Wow.
Like that's where her was at. Like they overly want the best for you, right? Your parents.
Super common.
Yeah.
Yeah. People feel like don't know where you're at, but I don't want you worse than where you look like you're at now. So I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah, 100%. And then it wasn't until, we started the podcast, and then I guess I was out and about, like talking about the podcast.
Yeah.
And then I remember I was in Melbourne doing a podcast with Jake from The Unlaced, and he's like, why did you get into mental health? Exact same question you just asked me.
And you hadn't shared this story before?
I'd never spoken about it publicly before.
And you weren't prepared for that episode?
Wasn't prepared at all. I don't know what, like obviously it's a mental health and sport podcast. I'm going to have to talk about it at some stage, but I just didn't think.
Yeah.
Like I just wasn't thinking. And then I sort of started speaking about Regan and how I felt about him, how I always looked up to him and respected him, and why I wanted to get into mental health space. And the feedback was incredible. Like the feedback was crazy. And then the wild thing and to be honest, like I don't think I did a good enough job. I walked away from that podcast thinking I didn't do him justice in talking about him enough.
I think you always have that feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, you need all the time in the world to talk about someone that you love.
Exactly. And then, but the thing that got me was Regan's mum reached out. And they're like, I got goosebumps now, man. Like she messaged me and she's just like, my biggest fear was that Regan's story or Regan would have been forgotten.
Wow.
So she's like, thank you so much. Like I appreciate everything you're doing. Like, don't ever stop. And I was like, do you mind if we just jump on a phone call?
Did you hesitate before sending that message? It was just like...
Straight in.
And how long since you'd spoken to her?
8 years.
Man.
8 years, yeah.
Huge.
And I jumped on the phone call with her and we talked for like an hour.
What do you say?
I said sorry for not being there. I said she's the best, man. She's the best. She speaks so well about Regan. Like sorry, bro. I knew this could happen.
It's all good.
We just spoke about Regan.
Yeah.
We spoke about that's when I found out that he was
Bipolar.
Potentially, he was. But they didn't diagnose it. It wasn't
Sure.
diagnosed, but he'd been in and out of hospital. I didn't know that at the time. Throughout Christmas, over New Year's, he had a few things that happened in his life that were pretty wild. Again, didn't know about them. But she's like a huge advocate about talking about Regan's story.
Yeah.
Mate, incredible lady. And then, but what's the thing that she said was she's like, and I said, I probably should have asked permission to talk about his story. And she's like, don't you ever ask for permission. Like,
Wow.
like keeping his story alive is the best, like keeping names alive is the best thing and like most respectful thing that you can do. So she's like, you share this story. Like you share this story on whoever will listen. So that's why I'll never shut up about this story. You know what I mean? Like I will talk about this forever. Cause it's important.
Totally. Oh man. Thank you for sharing. How do you what happens next? I'm just like, I just think about that scenario. I think about people in my own world that maybe I haven't reached out to or haven't spoken to. How does that conversation wrap up? And like, where do you go to from there? Are you now in frequent contact? Have you seen her since? Like what?
I want to go see her.
Yeah.
I really want to go see her. She lives out in Mackay, and she said, you come visit me whenever you want.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm going to. Yeah. So
She like a second mum.
mate, to be honest, like not really. Like Regan, we both didn't live on the Gold Coast, so we
Right.
would only see each other at footy carnivals. I'd only ever see her at footy carnivals.
Right.
She wasn't really a second mum, but I don't know. I feel like something so tragic like that happens, it just brings you closer
You're
together.
bonded. Yeah.
And it was just that conversation. Like we left the conversation super positive. Like to be honest, it kind of did feel like a weight lifted off.
Yeah.
I felt like that little box that I'd suppressed for so long was kind of like, it was like a like moment.
Yeah.
And then I got on the phone to my mum afterwards and said, hey, I just spoke to Regan's mum, and
Wow.
and she said exact same thing. She's like, I didn't want to make you upset. Told me all this stuff. She's like, when you got back from that schoolboy tour, Regan was on the coast. Like when we were going to catch up, we were going to hang out. And then I don't remember this, but mum was like, you didn't want to see him because you didn't want to tell him about how good the trip was. And that would have been the last time that I saw him.
All that FOMO, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So I didn't see him pure. And I was like, I'll see him next year. I'll see him when we play next year.
Yeah.
And then I never got to. But the way it wrapped up was, mate, it was for such a terrible thing, for such a just insane thing to happen to someone. She's like, the positive that we need to take from this is encouraging people to have these conversations.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like, I guess, if there was any light, like that's it. Yeah.
Wow. So you're 17, 18. At that point in time, you're still going ahead with your footy career.
Yeah.
What's now in the back of your mind? No, eight years later. So when this was only...
So I was 17. So it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. 10 years ago. It's 10 years. It was 10 years.
Australia
on
Day, in January.
Yeah, that just went.
Did anything in the moment when you lost Regan, like, did anything come to you as like, I'm going to do something with this someday or somehow, or at that point in time?
No, not really. Hey, not really. It was kind of like, it was sort of just like, not forget, but kind of just like, what's next and move on.
Yeah.
And then I think it's like, just slowly started coming out.
And you're still a boy, like you're still a kid
figuring it
at
out.
18.
I'm figuring it out. And
Don't know
then,
how to deal with emotions and deal with...
Mate, no idea. I always like heard like, oh, speaking about it is good.
Sure.
But why?
Yeah. And how?
How
and
do I...
who?
How?
Yeah.
Like what you just said then, how? Like people say you need to talk about it. Well, to who?
Yeah.
What do I say? And then even being on the other end of the conversation, how do you start those conversations? You know, who do I do it with?
Yeah.
You know, so these are all the things that I guess we're touching on. And to be honest, mate, I still don't know.
Yeah.
I'm still figuring.
It's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress. I'm still figuring out. That's why I wanted to go on the create a podcast and I guess have conversations with the best, most influential people in Australia, athletes in Australia. Because if they can be seen talking about their own struggles and vulnerabilities, then it makes it okay for us. And I guess it validates us and it makes it okay, which is so important. And super grateful to have friends who are in influential spaces in all different sports, not just rugby league. Like rugby league's easy, but like Olympic athletes, you know, swimmers, you know, motocross riders, surfers, like AFL players, soccer players.
You've had some really cool people on your podcast, and I'm excited to see where you take it in that space, because like you've only just tackled Australia, and there's the rest of the world waiting for these conversations. Man, talk to me about how that influenced your next step, because I want to just connect some of the dots.
Gotcha.
Playing NRL, the highest level in Australia, you had a pretty rough time, like, to put it simply, hey. And I was like, I've seen the footage, I've seen photos, I looked at them again today, and it like brought tears to my eyes just seeing you on the ground. Do you want to share just what happened, what it led to take you out of the game, so that we can piece some more
gotcha.
Piece the puzzle together?
100%. So in 2021, I was medically retired from the NRL. I had quite a few string of concussions that forced me out of the game. In 2019, 2019. And for context, for background, I'd had a heap of concussions throughout my career.
Yeah.
Like that Aussie Schoolboys tour, I probably had 3 or 4 like complete knockouts, and it was a 6-game tour.
Man.
But it wasn't talked about back then, and you would just get up and play. It's a like tough thing to do. Like you hurt your ankle, you get on and play. You hurt your shoulder, you just keep playing. Get a hit in the head.
It's another badge, you know.
It's another badge, man. So I just kept playing. In 2019, had a big string of concussions. At this point, the NRL had brought in like concussion protocols that you have to do. So once you have 3 big concussions, like certified concussions that you go off,
They check on you, like...
They check on everything.
Yeah. It's pretty...
We can do a deep dive.
It's pretty thorough, hey?
I can do a deep dive if you want, but...
What's the 30-second deep dive?
You get tested at the start of the year. They measure all your baselines in terms of like reaction time, problem solving, memory, everything. When you get a big concussion, you do those again. If you... The same, you pass, you might get a week if it's a big concussion. Sure. Or if you don't pass, then you might get a couple weeks. Right. Anyway, I got a string of a bunch. A heap of that were undiagnosed because a lot of the times you just get hit and you keep going.
Yeah.
But there was a few where I was just out and I couldn't negotiate them. So
eventually the doc told you it wasn't the coach, it wasn't anybody, it was the doctor.
Yeah, so I got 3, had to go see independent neurologists, did the whole screening. That's like a half day of testing, brain scans, same thing, the problem solving, memory, reaction time, numeracy, literacy, everything you can imagine. You're cooked by the end of the day. More in depth than what you would do beforehand. He recommended that I have 6 months off because my brain was, I guess, healing.
Yeah,
my brain was healing. I started noticing a few symptoms, which was irritability. So I would get angry over like stupid things or sad. Had a few. Actually, I probably didn't have headaches then. Anyway, 6 months turned to 12 months with COVID. Ended up coming back to the NRL, had a full season with the Gold Coast Titans, was the strongest I'd ever been because I was training. I wasn't doing any contact, so my body was just fit. Like
in form.
Mate, I was the strongest, fittest that I'd ever been because partly like I was coming off contract as well.
Sure.
So I was like, I need to prove to everyone that like I'm good.
Yeah.
I remember there was this one time, like the first big session back, pre-season day 1, we do like this 2K trial. And there was a bunch of, there's 2 guys in the forwards that were like...
Please tell me you smoked them all.
Mate, I smoked it.
Awesome.
Like, smoked it.
So
and
good.
like, I was sitting behind this one guy called Jai Whitbread who always used to win. And I just stayed with him the whole time. The last lap, I just blitzed it. And everyone's like, Keegs is back. Like, he's back. And that was kind of the switch where I was just like, let's go. Like, it was never an option to retire at that point. It was always like, nah, I'm 20.
Still so young, yeah.
21,
right.
22, like let's go.
Yeah.
Like I want to play for my country. I want to play State of Origin.
Yeah.
Anyway, end up moving on from the Gold Coast Titans. Wanted to be, I guess, in a grand final winning side. I thought Parramatta might have done that. They were in the top 4 for the last previous years. Their side was, you know, an international side, like stacked. And I was like, if I can make it in this side, then I can make it. Ended up playing round 1, only probably played 10 out of the 26 games due to the side being so stacked.
Yep.
But what happened through that year was like same thing. I got another 3 big concussions. That last big concussion is probably the one that you saw against Penrith.
Yep.
What happened, we were defending our try line. And I had a big Tavita Pangai running an unders line, and so I had to jam on him on an inside shoulder. Tavita's a big dude.
So how many kilos?
Kilos, Tavita would probably sit around probably like 120.
And what's that in pounds?
What's pounds? Double
Double
and a bit.
So like say 240.
240,
easy.
yeah, 240.
For everybody else, like that's big.
And I'm sitting at probably 100 kilos. So
Yeah.
he's probably got 40 pounds on me, 20 kilos. And I just came off second best.
Yeah.
Got a hit, obviously, with the contact, but the big one was like when my head hit the back and hit the ground. And from then I was completely out.
Yeah.
I don't remember that. I think I got a head knock earlier that game, which I didn't realize until watching the clips back. So I had 2 head knocks that game. And
memory-wise?
I don't really...
From that night?
From the game? No,
nothing.
I got nothing from the
Wow.
game. But then I think partly I might remember some things, but purely just watching the clips, I'm not too sure. But anyway.
So this leads you to the neurologist again?
And I knew that was my 3rd big one. I knew I'd have to go back and see him, but we're playing semis. Like I wanted to play semi-finals. So at that point, the neurologist wasn't considered. I was like back to, I guess, like a return to play protocol. I was trying as hard as I could to get back, but mate, my head was just like thumping. Like
Wow.
the symptoms were wild, and I thought maybe it's not so bad. You start seeing go, and because your mind is just like, let's play semis.
Yeah.
And so had all these like, I guess, like symptoms of like, yeah, being a bit irritable, having a headache. And then anyway, we got knocked out. I couldn't play in the semi-final, long
Right.
story short. The boys got knocked out in the semi. So once they get knocked out, everyone just disperses and goes everywhere. And then it's off season.
And you're still dealing with all of the head
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, mate. Yeah, I'm still dealing with it all. And that's when I really started to know the symptoms.
Sure.
Like I'm a month post concussion.
And you can't lie to yourself, hey? You can
No.
lie to other people, you can't lie to yourself.
Nah, and at that point, I'd know what the symptoms were because I'd done it before. Headache for like 6 weeks
Man.
post afterwards. I remember like a little story from when I was like the irritability piece. I remember like I was driving to my granddad's like 80th birthday, and my granddad wasn't doing that great. Like I thought I'd probably only have like not that long with him left. I remember driving there, just being angry. I was like, but it's weird because you're conscious of it. Like I know that my brain's recovering. I was like, it's just the way it is, but you still can't help it. I was in there, like I didn't say anything throughout the whole lunch, like dinner or whatever it was. And I remember just like thinking of anywhere else I could have been. And then I got out back in the car, and I was like, man, you're not going to see your granddad you might not ever see him again.
Yeah.
Like, and that was like a reality, and it just broke down. And
you know what's so similar is like grief is just like that as well.
yeah,
Driving to somewhere where you should be ready to enjoy granddad's 80th and you're angry.
Yeah.
And then you don't want to talk to people and you're thinking about myself and
of course, man.
when can I get out of here, and
Yeah.
you know, what's someone going to say to me that's going to set me off.
Bro, so
Yeah.
true. So true.
But yours is just pure concussion at that point.
Just brain was just healing.
Wow.
Anyway, I did all the testing, and I sat down with the neurologist. And he's just said, mate, you've had quite a few concussions. He's like, mate, I recommend that you medically retire from the NRL. That's my personal opinion. You've got other stuff going on outside of footy.
Did you expect that at all? Was that on the list of your diagnosis? Like
It could have been, yeah, for sure. There was two options. It's like you're going to get
You're
medically
in.
retired, or you're going to be out.
Right.
And I think if I really wanted to push it, I probably could have said, no, I don't have any side effects.
And
but I was just honest. And I said it to myself. I was like, I'm going to tell them what's going on, and because I want to get the best opinion. And for me, mate, I'm curious about a lot of things outside of footy. Like I'm super conscious of
Totally.
super interested in brain health and mental health and psychology and business. And I was like, well, for me, I was like, I want to be good for when I'm 40, 50, 60 down the track. I don't want to be those guys who, can't put a sentence together or can't remember, what they did yesterday. I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
And realistic, like probably not many people are probably going to want to sign a guy that's had two big stints off with concussion.
Sure.
It's not good for them. It's not good for me to have 6 months off every time I get a big knockout. Like realistically.
I like how you're thinking about the future in that moment. Like, I think that's harder to do, like easy to say, harder to do when you've given your life to this and you've lost people along the way, like in this. And it's like you could almost play just to do mates proud, to do family proud. And yet you're still thinking like, where does it really lie? Like, where can I truly play to my strengths? It's big, mate. Like, I commend you on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
At 24.
Yeah, 24.
24.
Yeah. Well, mate, to be honest, I was lucky. Like, I've got a great support network around me, man. Like,
Did you intentionally build that?
Yeah. Fortunate to be able to have parents and family members who are. But my friendship group, fully intentional. Yeah, a lot, and these are long friends as well. Like,
because when these moments hit us, who we have around us will really determine like where we go next.
Mate, you get it better than anyone.
Yeah,
you fully get it better than anyone. It's like we talk about like being open and vulnerable and talking to people, but it doesn't have to be everyone. You know, you might have a group of 3 or 4 guys. I got a group of 3 guys that I can call anytime.
So good.
And likewise. And I found that when I'm able to be vulnerable with them, they're more likely to be vulnerable with me. And that's built over time.
So what does that look like in your world? Like, we grow up with guys, we build these friendships. Sometimes we don't have these conversations. Like, did you intentionally like go, because you're in the space. I don't know if they're in the same space, like in terms of working and talking about and that sort of thing.
I think I'm that guy for a few people.
Yeah.
And just because of what we do in the spaces we're in, and maybe you're very similar. You're a very, like, I guess, likable, knock around person. Like, you're an easy person to have a conversation with. So I think there'd be a same thing. A lot of people to come to you to have these types of conversations. And so yeah, we have these conversations. But in terms of like those three guys and what we do, like I will call those three guys probably weekly.
Yeah.
Purely because I like sometimes not to just be like, obviously to check in, but just to see how they're going. Like I love them.
So good.
Got so much love for those guys. And I say those three guys. I do call quite a lot of people because I do have a lot of love for a lot of other people.
And you got a lot of mates.
And like, we're lucky, mate. But those three guys, like when I'm at like my deepest, darkest, like they know more about me than anyone. You know what I mean? And like they've seen like the best of me. They've been on the highest, but they've also been on the lowest of lows where like I'm back against the wall trying to fight out, trying to get out. You know what I mean? And they've been there for a lot of that.
Tell you a funny story. Yesterday, what day is it? Monday. Yesterday we had like our home group from church here.
Yeah.
We're talking about same, a bit different, you know, like what does a support network look like and how does love like outwork itself practically? And I was just like going through this list that I had. It's like when you can call or be the person that gets called late at night and they pick up and you have this chat. And one of the guys here, Steve, he was like, so you'd pick up late on a Sunday night? I'm like, yeah, no worries. And so we're sitting here last night, you know, in the lounge room, 9:34 p.m. on a Sunday, and Steve calls. He calls.
Yeah, he's good.
And it's funny because his sister lives 2 doors down here, and the only time he generally calls here is like when he's stuck at the front gate. So I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking he's stuck at the front gate.
Yeah.
I'm like, Steve, you all good? He's like, yep, just checking. It's Sunday night, making sure you'd pick up the phone.
So good, man.
But it is that, you know, and I just said, oh, mate, you're a joker.
Yeah.
And it's funny because he reminded me of my dad, and they're in a similar vintage, you know, and it was just beautiful.
Gotcha.
Because I'm like, my dad would do the same thing.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
I was just like, thanks for that.
But you'd be the same though, right? Like you'd be fully intentional with like the crew that you want to surround yourself with.
Yeah, totally. And when someone says something, you know, you can't skip by it. Like it might not be the moment right then and there. Maybe you're out at a dinner and a party or whatever, but like just to sticky note that and like circle back to that person, like with a text or a call, just say, hey, you mentioned this, just checking in on that.
But also to listen as well.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the times people are calling you not to ask for advice. Like they are, then great, and ask them if they want advice. But a lot of the times they just want someone to soundboard from. Yeah. And just be heard probably.
What have you found now talking about mental health on the pod with these crew who may not have shared some of this stuff ever and they just want someone to listen to? What have you found? What have you learned?
It's a learning piece, man. Yeah, it's a full learning piece. I think I'm lucky that pretty much everyone that's come on has been a friend or been a mate, or I've known them for the last maybe 10, 15 years, or they might be a new friend that we just get along so well. Like I remember sitting down with Braden Maynard. He's one of the leaders in the Collingwood side who just won the grand final. And I remember sitting with him and we teed it up and we talked about what we wanted to talk about, and it was great. And I remember I heard him on another podcast saying how he went through all this stuff in 2017, but he wasn't ready to talk about it. I remember the night before we had it all figured out. I was like, hey mate, like I heard you say this on the podcast. Like just wanted to, do you want to talk about it? He's like, Keeks, I don't want to talk about it. Just like, I was like, sweet.
Cool.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
And then we're mid podcast, like we're sitting down mid podcast and he's like, look, I know last night I said I wasn't ready to talk about this stuff, but you know, I feel so safe. I feel like I've got such a great relationship with you. I think I'm ready to talk about it because I think it's going to do a lot of good.
That's amazing.
And so, mate, we sat down and we talked about him struggling with his OCD for the last like 7 years. Yeah. He's like nights before games, nights before training. So OCD, his thing was checking. So like he'd have a staring competition at the back door saying, did I lock this back door? He knew that he had, but he just like couldn't get it out of his head that he had to keep checking it. Went on like games, big games with no sleep. But the best thing about that was that he talked about the tools and strategies that he used. And here I am thinking like, he's like, I'm ready to talk about it. I was like, all right, well, just jump straight into it.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of rapport. It's a bit of give and take. It's understanding what's probably off limits and what not to go down. A lot of it is common sense as you just learn, as you learn throughout the process. But I think it's lucky to have a bit of a rapport with them before going into it.
Yeah. Have you had anyone on the pod that like they spoke about grief in terms of loss?
Grief in terms of loss. Yeah, all the time. Jordan Ricky, perfect example. The episode that just went live, it was yesterday, but whenever this goes live, it might be a couple of weeks ago. He talked about losing one of his best friends to suicide growing up. Yeah, and what tools he did to I guess to navigate those conversations.
Sure. Have you noticed within footy that there is a rate of suicide compared to workplaces you've been in, school? Like, have you noticed anything like that?
I don't know if it's just the circles we knock around in, but I remember the year we lost Regan, there was 16 guys in the NRL community that had committed suicide.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was another thing where it was like...
Did that open up? Cause
conversation?
And also just awareness, because you don't think about something until it happens.
Yes.
And then you're like... And then you notice other things. It's like if you're going to buy a red Toyota, then you start noticing all these other red Toyotas.
The lady in the red dress.
It's like that with grief.
Yeah.
And so was it like that? Like in the NRL footy, you would hear of those stories anyway. But was it much more like heightened now? Like I think you'd lost Regan?
I think, of course, mate, of course. Like being exposed to it, especially when it hits so close to home, you're obviously looking for it.
Yeah.
And I think now having these conversations, I'm a lot more aware of it in other people as well. Not just like the fact that they might have lost someone, and navigating that grief process, but also when they're struggling with their own mental health, where you might not have heard from someone in a couple of weeks, or you might see that they might be a little bit down or a bit tired or a bit deflated, and just checking in. And
so what are some tools like that you've got in the chest?
For me or
in terms of reaching out, in terms of checking in, like even just picking up things. Like,
so I like to, especially for males, I like to do things with them. Like I think, I don't know what it is about, like we obviously do this so we can sit face to face with each other, but there is some...
Most guys can't look in the eye and just sit across...
It's tough, especially talking about their own vulnerabilities. Like it's pretty tough, mate. But when you can do something side by side with each other, and I don't know if it's a primitive thing or I'm not sure what it is, but if you can do something like, for me, I go, if they like surfing, I'm going surfing. Training's a huge one. I love training with someone, especially doing something hard with someone, because I don't know, it like lowers the barrier. Going for a walk with someone, going for a run with someone. Don't get me wrong, I'll still catch up for a coffee with someone, but I'll have, and I won't bring it up like mate, I know that you're feeling down. I know that if they're really bad, then I probably would, but I'll just check in on them. And then I'd explore different things. Like, how you going? Like, what's happening? Like, how's your partner going? Like, you know what I mean? And really subtly explore certain areas where you think they might be struggling. And this is like a learnt skill. Like it's just, you just start doing it. But also what I also found was, it's a lot easier for them to drop their barrier when you're open with your own vulnerabilities.
So good.
So when I'm talking about, like, if I'm talking, relationship stuff, I'd be like, mate, you wouldn't believe like what happened. Like, and then I'll talk about my own stuff, and then it's automatically okay for them to talk about their stuff. It's like lowers the barrier, and it lowers, like, I don't know, this little wall that they have up, and it's wild to see.
That's awesome, man. Like, it's so true. I've seen it in my own world as well, and I try and practice that. You got to practice it, and it doesn't mean going and finding something that I just need to be vulnerable about something. It's like, you got to be honest, truthful, and I love that. Get side by side for the guys. Do something physical. Love that as well. And then share something vulnerably first. Yeah, be the first to step out and share something. Yeah, that's really awesome. What are you planning to do? Is there anything, like you're with Movember? That's a November mostly thing, like it comes around once a year. Is there anything like in regards to the suicide side that like you're particularly passionate about, or is it the mental health? It's broadly.
I think suicide prevention is always going to be at the core. I think so. I did a mental health first aid course at the end of last year.
Wow,
which was,
I didn't know they exist,
mate.
Mental health first aid.
It's about the four pillars that we talked about was substance abuse, so drug and alcohol, psychosis, depression and anxiety, and a lot of it was around navigating conversations. wild. And looking for certain things in depression, anxiety. I recommend everyone should go do a mental health first aid course because it just makes you aware of what people are going through and the right steps. Like for me, I didn't know that if you think someone is really struggling and they're heading towards the point of suicide, asking them straight, have you thought about suicide, is the right thing to say.
Wow.
And why? Because, and then they might say yes, they might say no. But if they say yes, the next question is, have you thought about how you've done it or how you would do it?
Wow. Because
that means that they're a little bit further along the track to actually a completed suicide. And I don't say this lightly.
No,
I'm not saying this lightly.
Totally. It is the matter of life and death
100%
in that moment, in those questions.
But also after this, having the right steps to point them in the direction of a psychologist.
Sure.
If they can, and if you can't, then checking in on them is huge.
Yeah.
These are the conversations that I didn't know you should do that. I don't say that. Even little things about being on podcasts, talking about suicide is a wild conversation. It's a heavy conversation, and even talking about how people would actually do it, the process they would take. Not saying that is the best thing you could do. You shouldn't talk about the process of a suicide because that's giving, a research to people who are looking for it.
Sure. And so to be clear, you would ask, have you thought about how you would do it?
Yeah.
But not moving into the actual process.
No, so what I meant was if you're speaking openly on a podcast platform
gotcha.
Or if you were speaking on social media, you wouldn't say how you would do it because what they found is lately, I think in the last maybe 5 years, the amount of completed suicides has dramatically increased due to research, due to the information being out there. So that's when I have people come on and we're talking about these conversations. We're not talking about how they would do it because...
Talking about the what,
you're talking about
not the how.
What, yeah,
strategies,
why, 100%, but never the process because the process... people are listening to this.
Totally.
And if they're already in a dark place, well, that could be a way for them to go about it. So mate, little things like that.
Sure.
Little things like that.
That's huge.
Wild, hey.
It's crazy how simple some of the questions that we can have in our back pocket are. So I remember when you did the Movember event.
Yes.
And that's where we met Tilly, who's
amazing.
Who's the episode
One
just
of the
gone.
One of the greatest.
And she lost her dad to prostate cancer. And I put my hand up and I just said, how do you approach that conversation about prostate cancer? I don't know what the stats are, but I've heard that more men die of prostate cancer than women die of breast cancer.
Really? I didn't know.
I need to clarify that.
Yeah.
But that's what and don't quote me on that, everybody listening.
Yeah.
But, even if it's somewhere in the vicinity, that's, and so the conversations with us guys don't get had. And I just said, how do you have the conversation, Tilly? And she just said, just ask. Yeah. Have you had your prostate checked? And I was like, could it be any more simpler than that?
Just ask the question.
Yeah.
I love that, man. I love that. My old boy, he gets coffee with a bunch of old guys every morning at Palm Beach at Jefferson's cafe. And it's so funny that you say that because one of the boys, I think, got his prostate checked or had some sort of test where they were checking for cancers and they found a little something.
Right.
And he went back and told all the boys, the 10, 15 boys, and they're like, and it prompted them to go get checked.
Awesome, mate.
And how cool's that?
Lowers the barrier.
Mate,
No shame.
They just asked the question and they were like, oh, what'd you do? How'd you go do that? Where did you go? What are the questions? What should I be looking out for? And they just had a conversation. And they're and these are guys in their 60s who aren't big on talking about mental health. You know what I mean?
Totally.
That Movember event, my old boy and his mates came and they're just sitting baking having beers and they're like, oh, times are changing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's their comment. Yeah. Times are changing.
Yeah.
Have you have you had feedback from anyone in that generation from your podcast that they're tuning in and
Mate, heaps.
It's massive.
There's a bunch of old boys that I see on Crumb Beachfront on the Gold Coast, and it's funny. I think the sporting thing or the sporting element to the podcast breaks it down. Or breaks down that barrier for those older guys because they love watching footy, right? They froth it. But the one with Nico Hines, who was the Dally M, that's the best player in the competition. Not last year, the year before. The amount of response that I got from old boys, tough, proper tough old school lads, and they're like, I love that podcast.
Yeah, right.
They're like, mate, I bloody love that podcast. Like, well done.
You're
Keep
making
it
it.
up.
You're making a difference, dude.
Mate, I don't know. Like,
you are making a difference.
I don't know. Like, I think about that. Like, because sometimes you think, are we just having these conversations just to have conversations? Like, are we actually, like, mate, same for you. Like, why do you start this? Like, why did you start this thing?
Big question. Yeah, great question. I guess going through grief myself and knowing that the support wasn't there when I needed it most.
Yeah.
That's like the core.
Yeah.
It's like there weren't podcasts then. People didn't ask you the direct questions. You know, the support that I got was kind of like, coffee, and then that was it, and no more after that. It was kind of like, all right, from the person that I thought was there to support. And so that's why it's like.
And imagine how many people are going to be listening to this and the flow on effect. Like, it might not be that person. It's going to be the conversation that person has. And it's the compounding effect going forward. That's why I've got so much respect for you, mate, and for what you're doing here, because it's conversations that need to be had. Yeah. If it's one person, like, and we all go through like self-doubts, like, are we even making a difference? Like, is this even worthwhile? Like, am I creating genuine impact? Like, I think about that.
I think that's important. It's like, would we still do this if one person listened? And I just want to say to everybody listening right now, not everybody, you who's listening, in your car, on your walk, at your home, wherever you're listening from right now, I'm speaking to you, and you matter. Whether you're watching this, listening, whether someone's given this to you or forced you to listen to it, you matter. And Keegan, you would do your podcast for that person. I would do this podcast for that person. Kaylee and I would both do it. And that's it.
Mate, goosebumps. Like, you just hit the nail on the head there. One person. Like, that's why there's so many people doing podcasts now. It's so reality. Like, every person who has an opinion is doing a podcast.
And there's, crazy ones out there. I love educational ones that, like, I don't, sure, there's comedy and stuff that's good as well. But I love ones that I'm like, I took something away from that. I'm going to implement it. My life's better for it.
But, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. What I was going to say was, I got some advice from I guess like another podcaster who does really well, and they're like, mate, if you're like in it for the wrong reasons, like, you're fully not going to last. Like, if you're doing this for genuine, authentic reason because it means something to you, and I know this means a lot to you, same as Keegan Company means a lot to me. Like, you'll do it for longevity. You'll do it if no one's listening. Totally. If one person's listening, you'll do it, and you'll do it for. And I don't know about you, but everything that I'm doing now, I want to be doing for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like minimum,
100%.
like I'm like long term. Like, people think, like, I don't expect to have growth at the moment. Like, I expect to be doing this for 10 years.
Yeah.
Same with training, same with business, same with everything.
Because it doesn't change. Like, people's minds still need love and attention, care.
Yeah.
Grief. People need all the support they can get.
Yeah.
To jump around a bit, I know we've been jumping.
That's right, brother.
Yeah, we're just having a
yeah.
You know when you know someone where you just jump around. We got no scripts here. We got no scripts.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about Regan. I want to know from you, how do you like to remember him? How do you honor him? Are there practical things? Are there ways that you celebrate him?
Mate, the biggest one that I do to celebrate him is talk about him doing this.
Great.
Like, literally doing this, and I'm so grateful for you to ask me to come on this podcast, mate. Like, I at first I was nervous to talk about Regan. I was, I guess, a bit nervous to be vulnerable on camera about him. I wasn't sure how to do it. I wanted to make sure that I was doing it right. That was a big one.
I think it's massive that you've connected with his mum again. Like,
huge. Mate, that was the biggest thing, connecting with her. But like, the biggest thing is talking about him. And I share it so often, man. Like, I'll jump on any podcast and talk about him and any story for that same reason, for one person. Every time I catch up with Kurt DeLewis, our other friend.
I was wondering what your guys' journey had been since Regan's death. Both
got to play NRL. But he's playing, I guess, like Queensland Cup, which is the tier below, but he played a lot of first grade. He's struggled with his own, struggles along the way. not for me to talk about at all. But we've had some pretty rogue conversations. It's actually funny, man. Like I've been off the piss now I've been off the drink, alcoholic beverages. For those who don't know what I'm referring to. People are like, piss, what are you talking about? So Aussie,
Very
hey?
Aussie.
So Aussie. I've been off alcoholic drinks for maybe 5 months now. And it's so cool because when I said I'm not drinking, I was like, I'm not going to not go out. I'm still doing all the social things. The first month I had 3 weddings and 2 bucks parties.
Yeah.
Still out to
It's usually what happens when you say I'm going to stop drinking.
Yeah. But the conversations that we have at that time of the night, it's wild how people are so willing to open up because the alcohol puts all the defenses down. So you'll have these wild conversations about people who are just eager to let go of that's been going on in their life because they're probably assuming that they're going to forget about it the next day. But brother, I don't forget because I'm sober. You know what I mean? Awesome. And so I can check in and
great.
And we've, the amount of conversations that we've had on nights out where it's just wow, people are actually fully struggling. You know what I mean? And it only takes them I'm not condoning alcohol to be the way to talk about things. I'm not condoning.
I think everyone who's been around someone that's been drinking can relate.
But they get it. You know what I mean? They get it. But yeah, no, I guess to answer your question, talking about Regan is the best way to celebrate him.
So good.
Yeah.
And the more that we say their name, the more comfortable we get. Yeah. It's such it's like the Grand Canyon at first. You say their name, it's like you've fallen down the Grand Canyon again, but it closes up the more we speak about them. And so I'm proud of you.
Mate, thank you, brother.
Thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you for being willing just to share that story in its entirety. Is there anything we have missed that you would love to have been asked or to have shared?
You know what? I asked that question at the end of my podcast as well, and I didn't even think.
And do you know what? I've never asked it.
Oh, really?
I don't think so. Yeah.
Something that I'd like to share. I really enjoyed this, talking about it, the story. I think we touched on some really great topics around support networks, around having good people around you. I think that's huge. Probably I'd like to ask you what do you want to do with this thing? What's the goals? What's the goals for you? Where do you see yourself taking this whole thing?
Such a good question. We actually want to reach 1 million Christians to help them process and find meaning after grief.
Gotcha.
That's what we want to do. So it's bigger than us, and so it's well and truly out of our hands. But we want to. We're starting virtually like this, and eventually we want to get to meet people all over the world and do this journey together. I just remember when Dad died, I'd never lost anyone as close to him. I'd lost people to all sorts of things, aunties and friends and families, to diseases, to suicide, to accidents and stuff. But my dad, it was the closest to home. And I just remember wanting to find another guy that had lost his dad. That's all. And I was like, no one understood. I just want to find another guy that lost his dad. And I just sent it. I didn't even know him that well.
So you found the guy?
I found a dude. It was in another band. I was in bands. And so when he shared his story, I was just it was questions. Yeah. Questions galore. I'm like, dude, how did you navigate this? How'd you do this? How are you going through the journey of getting married at that time? I was single, nowhere near marriage. I'm like, how did you do that? How are you going to process having kids? And so these questions just started coming out.
Yeah.
And I just found so much comfort, dude, in finding someone else that had been through the fire and came out the other side with hope.
How old were you when you lost your old boy?
23.
You're 23. How are you going? I mean, you probably talked about it on other episodes, but mate, you're not far off from being a dad yourself.
Yeah, it's big.
What's the thought process? Do you think about that often?
Yeah, it's huge. I do, because I've modeled most of my life after Dad. Yeah. And so, but before we've even had kids, I thought about Dad in terms of I'm about to get married. So there were all these milestones along the way. Gotcha. And how do I want to lead my marriage? How do I want to lead as a father? Comes from him. And so it's been 11 years now of processing that stuff. Yeah. And there's still more to go. Mate, if I keep talking now, the tears are going to flow, So I think when we have our little girl, I'm going to be a mess. Oh, man. Kaylee's going to be a mess. We just know it, and we're expecting that. Yeah. And so She's tearing up in the background now, you know. And so, and I something that's helped me is like trying to set an expectation of what's coming, even if it's worse than what the reality might be, and just knowing like, man, I'm going to hit the ground, be a blubbering mess, and like that's the reality. And if it comes in anything short of that, like I'm doing all right, you know, like I've set the expectation.
But mate, very cool. Like that's got to be the most rewarding thing, and something like obviously so exciting coming up. So mate, I'm excited for you, bro. Like
Uncle Keegan.
Uncle Keegan, I'll be coming over here. You won't be able to get rid of me.
So good.
No, I am looking forward to it. And mate, like again, like well done on everything you're doing here.
Likewise, dude. I do have one more question for you, and then I want to point people to your direction.
Yep.
We've talked about suicide. It is a super heavy topic.
Yep.
Where would be the best place people can just go from this episode to find some support, some material?
Yep. So there's a bunch of different Lifeline numbers. Like Lifeline's great. It's 1300. I'm not sure the exact term, but you can Google Lifeline. You can Google Lifeline.
Yeah. I'm not sure if that's international. Definitely Australian. So just to
you could, and then even going to your GP. Like GP, I definitely know in Australia. I'm not sure about the American or UK system. I'm pretty sure the UK system follows the Australian system. So we follow their system very well. But go to your GP. A lot of the times that they can refer mental health plans.
Sure.
They can refer you to psychologists where you might get a...
Actually, I went to a GP and I got a mental health plan. So
great.
Yeah.
And they can also, and you probably know, like you can get a couple sessions for free. That's initially. Right. But the biggest tip I say is some guys and girls might go to a psych, go see a psychologist, and they might not gel with that person and they might not enjoy it. But the best thing is like finding a psych is like dating. It's like, you know, you might not, like, you're probably not going to like the first one. I was lucky that the psych that I first met when I was playing footy, she was great. And we just gelled, and she was really good, and I've stuck with her. But I know so many crew who might go through like 3, 4, 5 different sites before they find the right one that they gel with and they're happy to. So I think online support, there's always people willing to talk, and there's actually trained people out there that you can just pick up the phone anonymously and just have a conversation with. Go to your GP to refer psychologists. A best way to find psychologists is also word of mouth. So if you know a friend that sees a psych, talk to them. To see if how their process was, if they like their psychologist, because I think word of mouth's probably a big one. Like the amount of people that I've referred to my psych is wild. So yeah, it's just it's awesome. Just I think they're probably the big ones.
Cool, dude. It's been big.
It's been wild.
Let's go get dinner.
Yeah.
Before we do, best place to hang out with you, is it Instagram?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. We want to do more stuff on YouTube. We'll do some longer stuff. Some longer format stuff. Like the whole episode video is on YouTube, but I think Instagram is where we do a lot of our clips.
So I'll drop your links below. Keegan and Company. It's going places, dude. I'm so excited to just see you take over the planet for mental health, and proud of you, bro. Thanks for coming on today. Appreciate you.
I appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
Hey, if this episode has been helpful, share it with somebody that you know might be on this journey. Maybe you've lost someone to suicide and you've got family and friends just working out, trying to put together the pieces. Share this episode with them. We'd love to walk the journey with you. And until next episode, big love from myself and Keegan. Ciao.
See you, Chris.